how many here have ever heard of Simplot before? Oh, I'm amazed. A few of you have. Thank you. We're a privately held company. You've probably never, many of you have never heard of us before, but if you've ever had McDonald's French fry, you've probably eaten our product. So we'll talk about that a bit more. Hubert? Which one of you is Hubert? You. Oh, you are you've been given a great opportunity. In parts where I'm from, in Idaho, there are a lot of people who would have liked to have stand in your shoes. As Ira says, you got to present the bird to President Obama. Where I come from, that takes on a whole different meaning. So. I'd like to start my session today just with the question, who's going to feed them? As Ira mentioned, sometime this year, 2011, our world population clock is going to cross 7 billion people. And experts are not quite sure when, but they think by 2045 or 50, that clock is going to cross 9 billion people. And so somehow between now and then, we've got to figure out how to produce more food. We'll have to do it on less land. We'll have to do it with less water. And we'll have to do with a heck of a lot more scrutiny than we've got now. So my question that I'd like to pose to you is, who the hell's going to feed them? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Let me tell you a bit about me. I come from a small farm in southeast Idaho. The culture up there is a man got him a wife, then got him 100 acres and had 100 kids to help him farm those 100 acres. And while we had a great family, each of us were little economic units. You know, we were all out there doing our little part, and we ended up having a dairy farm. Back then, 100 cows was a lot of cows. Not much today, but I went away to college. My first year of college, worked for the college dairy. They had 500 cows, and so I would come home as an expert each weekend and tell my dad how he should run his dairy. And he was fine for that, and finally he said, "You're not really thinking of a career as a dairyman, are you?" And I said, yeah, man, I'm going to college, learning all these great things. And he pointed out to me that the only difference between being in jail and being on a dairy is that when you're in jail, you don't have to milk cows twice a day. As fate would have it, 4 weeks later on Halloween, I ended up in jail for 3 days for what I thought was a hilarious prank. The local police people didn't. And it was the first 3 days of my life I didn't have to milk cows. And it was a lot of fun not to milk cows, and so I chose a different career path. And, so anyway, in fact, I came into the cow palace today, my first time here, and that smell, you know, that cow palace smell. My wife, who is from California, is so disgusted with me that, because when I go to anywhere where there's animals, the first thing I want to do is buy a hamburger. I grew up going to an auction every week, and there's just something about sitting there with all that cow manure and the cow sweat and sweaty old farmers and eating a hamburger that just does it for me. So, are we going to have hamburgers today, Judy? I hope so, because my juices are flowing. My family, I told you I'm the last of 100 kids. I'm actually number 9 in my family. My brothers and one sister were all either educators or farmers. I was the only one who chose a corporate route. And to the day that she died, my mom was pretty sure I worked for the mafia. But my career has always been around agriculture. I was an ag banker for a few years. I was deputy director for the State Department of Agriculture in Idaho for a few years. And for the last 21 years, I've worked for this company called the JR Simplot Company. I'm not sure I'm going up, you know, going from a banker to a bureaucrat to a corporate guy, but I love the Simplot Company because they're a privately held company. We're owned by the Simplot family. Mr. Simplot was kind of like Sam Walton, a guy who dropped out of school, started his own little business, became a multi-billionaire just from working in the natural resources industry. To say we're the largest company in Idaho, the largest bread company in Idaho, I know in California that's kind of like saying that Curly's the smartest of the Three Stooges. But in Idaho, the Simplot Company is kind of like what Boeing was in Seattle. And so from that early days, Mr. Simplot actually started sorting potatoes. And when the electric sorter first came out, he and a partner bought one and would go from farm to farm sorting potatoes. And he got tired of, Mr. Simplot got tired of being in a partnership, so they flipped the coin to see who would end up with the sorter, and he won. From that sorting business, he started sorting onions and potatoes, and he was selling the cold onions to a dehydrator here in the Bay Area and not getting paid for them. And so he came down here one day to meet with the owner of that dehydration company and sat in the office for literally hours. And back then, remember, we used to have secretaries. The secretary would not let him see the owner of the company. Meanwhile, another guy came in, sat next to Mr. Simplot, who also had not been paid. And it turns out that the guy sitting there was the guy who bought the dehydrated potatoes that Mr. Simplot would sell their onions. Mr. Simplot would ship the raw onions to this guy that they were waiting for. He'd dehydrate them and then sell them to this guy. Well, Mr. Simplot talked to this guy and decided and wrote a contract on the spot on the back of an envelope that he would provide for him dehydrated onions. Had no idea how the hell to dehydrate onions, but figured he could do it. So went out, found a truck from this company, followed into their dehydration unit, walked in, got the name off the dehydrator, and went back to Idaho and built his own dehydrator. From that, he started dehydrating onions, potatoes, got a military contract, and pretty soon became a large produce company in the state of Idaho for onions and potatoes. One day the war was over, and the military came and said, we no longer need those dehydrated products. So we had several large plants and nothing to do with these potatoes. And started working on different ideas, different concepts, and invented this thing called the frozen French fry. Worked and worked and worked for years and years and years, trying to figure out what can we do with this potato besides dehydrate it. McDonald's and other fast food companies were becoming very popular, but French fries were a hard thing for local restaurants to manage because potatoes all around the country are different and they make different kinds of French fries. And so Mr. Simplot actually perfected this thing called the frozen French fry. Went to a guy by the name of Ray Kroc, and over a handshake, they made a deal that he would provide frozen French fry products to McDonald's, and the rest for our company's history. And so around the world, wherever McDonald's has gone, Simplot's frozen potatoes has gone with them. We also, in Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah, there's an amazing deposit of the mineral phosphate. We dig that stuff out of the mountains and turn it into phosphate-based fertilizer, crop nutrients, which we sell to farmers all across the western U.S. We're also the largest cattle producer in the western United States. So that gives us a little bit of flavor about our thing in agriculture. And I guess what I love about our company is we're farmers ourselves, but we work every day with farmers. And we work with farmers from Idaho to California to Mexico to Oregon and Washington. And we've been described as a company that will last probably one day longer than the last farmer lasts. And so it's interesting for us. We sell stuff to farmers. We buy their products, their produce. We lease things. We lease things to farmers. We advise them. We're agronomists for them. We serve them. We listen to their complaints. They get mad at us. We get mad at them. One big happy family, as you might guess. But when it all comes down to it, we're like Ira talked about, we're a family-owned enterprise. The Simplot family, Mr. Simplot died when he was 99 and a half years old. His family now own the business. They are committed to keep it a privately held family company. But let me tell you about an Idaho farm boy who came to California. I started asking girls to marry me in Idaho. Nobody would say yes, so I went to Utah. Nobody would say yes. Just kept on moving south. And finally in Bakersfield, California, a girl said yes. And she and I have been married for 36 years. But I came down to meet the dad, meet mom and dad. Her father took me out in Bakersfield. I'd never been in that area before. And it's my experience in life that people either love or hate Bakersfield. I'm one of those people who love Bakersfield. And the reason why is because when I was a child, we grew sugar beets. Now, back in those days, sugar beets were these little tiny seeds, and you'd plant them, and 5 would grow up in the space of 2 fingers. And so you literally had to get a hoe, a short-handled hoe. Anybody remember this? Anybody know what the hell I'm talking about? A few of you do. You'd get these short-handled hoes, and you'd walk down the row, bent over like this, thinning those beets so there's only one plant for every 3 or 4 inches. It was awful work. We all hated it, but like I say, we were little economic units of my dad's farm, so that's what we did. So when the beets were harvested in the fall, it was great joy and jubilation at our family. Those damn things were out of the ground and gone for winter anyway, and then we'd start over the next year. So I go to Bakersfield, California, and my father-in-law takes me out, and they're harvesting sugar beets in this one field, and I'm thinking, oh man, I love the idea of pulling sugar beets out of the ground, harvesting sugar beets. There's something magic about it. Then we went across the street, and they were planting sugar beets right across the road. And I could not get my head around that. Could not figure out these California people who harvest and plant sugar beets at the same time. What are they thinking? And so since then, I've had this love affair with California agriculture. California agriculture is a planet all to itself. You guys are absolutely amazing. You're the envy of the world. Certainly the envy of the Idaho people, except for those of us who don't like owning sugar beets. However, that's not a problem. Let me give you just a bird's eye view of what you have here in this beautiful state. You know, it's a $30 billion industry, $30 billion. About 25% of your available farmland, or your available land, is farmland, and you send about just less than $13 billion worth of stuff overseas every year. Your number one export is almonds. Most of that goes to Europe. Your number 2 is rice. Number 3 is wine. Number 4 is pistachios. Number 5, walnuts. Your top 5 commodities are dairy. Am I about done? Okay. Dairy, greenhouse, grapes. Your main trading partners, Canada, Europe, Japan, China, and the number 1 county for ag in California is who? Yeah, some of you know that. So let me finish with the question that I started with. Who's going to feed them? That's a big challenge. All of us in agriculture are worried about that. There's less and less people interested in getting into agriculture these days. So I would suggest to you that the people who are going to feed those 9 billion people in 15 or 20 years are sitting in your classrooms today. And we need to figure out how to spark that interest in them to help us figure out how to feed 9 billion people.